I would tend to agree. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you started to talk about mind control in Hollywood and getting into character and whatnot, and I believe that it's just absolutely rampant in Hollywood. I believe that's why, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, when you're talking about how the quality of acting has changed. If you look at these old movies and these people who were considered great actors, like back in the 40s and 50s, their performances are kind of laughable at times, and much more realistic performances these days. And I believe it's because they're not actually acting per se. What they are doing is, the reason that they are so good at what they do is because they have a whole bunch of people living inside of them, basically,
Right.
They have all of these alters, and they get a particular role, and they're probably cast specifically in roles that they're well suited for, and they're able to pull up these alters that so that they're not really acting so much as they are basically becoming the character that they're playing by accessing these altered personalities, and I'm sure they have handlers on the set and whatnot, and I think when you hear talk in Hollywood about method acting and about getting into character, and you hear about these people that like Heath Ledger or whatever, that supposedly get so far into the character that they can't leave it behind at the set, and they literally become that person that they're playing throughout the course of the filming, and all of those that's just metaphorical speech for mind control, basically, is what it is, So, I think it runs rampant, and it does break down, and, they try to get them back on track, Britney Spears or these various other people that have very public meltdowns. And sometimes they're able to get them back on track, and sometimes they're not. And if they become too big of a liability, then they have to be gotten rid of,
Right,
and,
or they have to be replaced with a new star that's been programmed in a new and different way. And they can't keep, maybe it takes too much manpower, too many handler hours to keep these people under control. And I mentioned in I wrote a little bit about your book in one of my recent newsletters, how you can see the vestiges of the lost selves in the fat, really bloated physical body and kind of lost personality. It's almost like a lost soul of Elvis, for instance, in his late life before he died. And then apparently Jim Morrison, you told us, was the same. He got all fat and heavy and depressed. And it's almost like these are the real person is finally in shock and experiencing this depression and this rootlessness, because they have been the self has been stolen away for the entire duration of this person's life.
Yeah. I mean, who was Jim Morrison, really? In a remarkably short period of time, from 1964, when he was photographed with his father, until he died in, 1971, I believe, he presented 3 completely different public personas to the world. His pre-Doors persona, which, was the short-haired, collegiate, very conservative, very clean-cut looking kid. And then, the Doors Jim with the long hair and, the whole persona and that went along with that. And then in the later years, before his alleged death, he had changed completely into this very overweight, very hairy, reclusive, guy that shunned stardom, wanted to escape the fishbowl, the spotlight, and, you look at pictures of the 3 of them, and this was over just a period of 6-7 years. It's just amazing how completely the guy was able to reinvent himself 3 times in that short period of time. And, you gotta wonder, who the hell really was Jim Morrison? Did Jim Morrison even know who Jim Morrison was,
Exactly. And I think also this applies to many other people. I remember when I read your postings on this Laurel Canyon series back on the internet when you had them up. And for those who don't know, Dave started by just posting essays about his delvings into Laurel Canyon and the personalities who lived there. And then apparently your readers from the internet were cluing you into tips here and tidbits there, and you were fleshing it out, and it got big enough that you got a publishing offer and you did the book. But I remember when I was reading about Jack Nicholson, and you said Jack Nicholson appeared out of nowhere, and he was from military origins as well, and nobody knows who that person really is.
Jack Nicholson's story is pretty amazing. The guy did not even have a birth certificate until he was 17 years old. I mean, legally, he did not actually exist until he was 17 years old. There's no birth certificate, no records of his birth at the hospital where he was supposedly born. His parentage is basically unknown. He was issued like I don't remember what they have some technical name for it. When he was 17, a record of some kind of belated record of birth that was issued when he was 17, and the information that's on it is known to be false. And that's the only record of his birth that exists. So nobody really knows who the hell Jack Nicholson is. We don't know who his parents are. We don't know much of anything. He very extremely murky situation, to say the least, that this guy could get through 17, almost reach adulthood before he even had any official records that he even existed at all. So yeah, I mean, some of the backstories on these people are just really, really strange. And if anybody's wondering, by the way, what Jack Nicholson has to do with this, the so-called Young Turks, who were a group that included people like Warren Beatty and Dennis Hopper, Bruce Dern, Peter and Jane Fonda, Sharon Tate, Jack Nicholson, whatnot. They were also very much a part of the Laurel Canyon scene, and were very much involved in film projects that were closely tied to that scene. A lot of people probably don't know this, but Jack Nicholson actually began as kind of a screenwriter, and is credited with writing two very trippy 1960s hippie movies, the Monkey's Head and the movie The Trip, which was actually supposed to be like a cinematic approximation of an LSD trip, written by Jack Nicholson, starring Peter Fonda and Bruce Dern, and filmed at a house in Laurel Canyon that was later occupied by the band Love. And so he was very closely tied to the scene. He was also obviously in Easy Rider, another movie with very, very deep ties to the Laurel Canyon scene. So, in addition to the musicians, there was also this cadre of young actors who lived in and hung around and partied with the rock stars and were very much a part of the scene. And not too surprisingly, I guess, all of them come from military intelligence backgrounds as well. You know, Sharon Tate's father was Lieutenant Colonel Paul Tate, U.S. Air Force Intelligence. Dennis Hopper acknowledged before his death that his father was a career intelligence officer going all the way back to OSS days. Bruce Dern's uncle was Skull and Bones man. And just on and on through the list, you find the very Jack Nicholson, as we said, we don't know who the heck he was. So again, you have all of these people emerging on the scene who just happened to come from that very same background as the rock stars that they were hanging out with.
Yeah, it is mind-blowing. And as I read your book, I had to do it kind of chapter by chapter. I also wanted it to last. Those murders were part of the script somehow, because these scripts are, their trajectory and the terrain is kind of mapped out, I think, far in advance of the actual events. And, I want to remind the listeners of what Laurel Canyon looks like. These canyons are very, very overgrown and leafy and secluded and wooded. And I'm looking at the MapQuest aerial view, and you can see that those fissures that do go through the mountains, they're all shadowy, and I guess these would be the perfect area for, now here we get into the occult rituals and even Satanism, and much of that was part of the Laurel Canyon scene as well. That's by inference in your book, but you're not really painting everything in a very clear way. You're just giving us the layout of it, the elemental ingredients. But you'd have to conclude that this was a very dark enclave.
Yeah, Devin, there were a lot of occult overtones, a lot of things that seemed to happen on key occult dates. And, a lot of these people acknowledged that they were avid followers of Crowley or of Madame Blavatsky or, some of these other really very, very well-known figures in the occult world. And, there was quite a bit of that going on, absolutely. And, to me, the death of Godot Pelikas, who was the son of Vito, who we were talking about earlier, Vito and Sue, his death looks a whole lot like a ritual sacrifice to me. He died when he was 3 years old on, I believe it was December 23rd, like 2 days before Christmas on the winter solstice, basically. He was connected to Kenneth Anger, a very well-known occultist and follower of Crowley and Anton LaVey and whatnot. And there's just a lot of elements to that death, including the fact that there's so many stories about how it happened, so many conflicting stories about how the kid actually died. It begins to look a whole lot like a sacrifice, And then there's the fact that the parents, rather than mourning their kid's death, went out that very night and seemed to celebrate it by going out dancing, just like a couple hours after the kid had died. Their only son, they lose their only son 2 days before Christmas, and they decide to go out and hit the strip and party, So, there's a lot of elements of that to me look very much like a ritual sacrifice.
Yeah, and it also makes you think about the definition of counterculture, because the book, as I read it, would bring up things like wife swapping and all this crazy behavior, the drugs. So all these people, if they were truly mind controlled, then they would be not acting at all like people in the rest of the culture, right? So this is counterculture.
And then, there's the question of, people ask me all the time were, are you saying that these people were actively conspiring to create this false scene? And, the answer to that is quite possibly not. They very well may not have known themselves, how they were being used. But that's very, very difficult to explain to some rank and file readers that aren't, well versed in the subject of mind control, because as soon as that comes up, you get the eye rolls and people just immediately lose interest. So that's a tough one to explain to a lot of people, that these people could very well have been unaware themselves of what was really going on,